Okay, so we got Nesara Gesara Part 4, the all-powerful government, Demoncrats, destroying themselves, 1111 or 0000, mask, protect better than a condom. Okay, so for the most part, the federal government knew its limitations until around 1871, and in the 18 for the most part, the federal government knew its limitations until around 1871 and the 1880s. Research the election of 1876, and you'll see the same shenanigans being played then that happened in the 2020 elections. When shenanigans are played, things begin to change. I might do a video sometime on the election of 1876 to go over that in more detail. So let's go over the powers of Congress. Article 1, Section 8 will give you the powers of Congress. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. To borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States, to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States, to establish post offices and post roads, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, and offenses against the law of nations, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulations of the land and naval forces, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of officers and the authority of training militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square, as may, by session of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or any department or officer thereof. So, we're gonna take a little time to kind of like introduce maybe some laws and see if they hold up to the Constitution. Like when the country, or at least those in powers, decided to ban alcohol beverages, they had to do it by the means of a constitutional amendment. They understood that the Constitution does not empower the federal government to simply legislate a ban on alcohol. More recently, of course, when the government decided to ban some drugs, they simply passed laws. You kind of notice a difference between that? I mean, that is kind of odd, wouldn't you say? These laws are just as unconstitutional as a law banning alcohol beverages would have been in 1920. So why have these drug prohibition laws been passed if Congress is not empowered to do so? And why has the Supreme Court upheld these unconstitutional laws? The Constitution has not changed, but the attitudes of the Congress and government have. The illegal act of Congress to pass prohibition led to a rise in gangs and violence. So what did Congress do? Because of Prohibition era in 1934, the Congress passed the National Firearms Act, the NFA. What they really wanted to do was simply ban certain kinds of weapons. Of course, they could not impose an outright ban. The Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms. But imposing taxes is a power constitutionally granted to the Congress in Article 1, Section 8. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. The NFA does not therefore ban any weapon, but it does impose a tax on certain weapons and destructive devices, which the Congress thought to be the primary weapons used by gangs, machine guns, sawed-off shotguns, and the like. So, I mean, think about that. Because of Prohibition, because they passed that amendment, they caused a rise in gang and violence, which is the same issue going on today with the drug prohibition. So their laws are the reason for all the violence, the shooting, the gangs, and everything. So we need to think about how we can undo that. More recently, of course, Congress has enacted an assault weapons ban prohibiting the manufacture of certain scary-looking guns, a ban on the manufacture of machine guns, except for law enforcement, has also been enacted. The Second Amendment has not changed. These bans are just as unconstitutional now as they would have been in 1934. What has changed is the willingness of the Congress to legislate in areas where it is not empowered to do so, and also a failure on us not to speak up because we accept the change. We're like, oh yeah, but I'll get to that point here later. Experience has taught that Congress the Congress to legislate in areas where it is not empowered to do so. Experience has taught the Congress. I messed up there. Experience has taught the Congress that it can ignore the constraints of the Constitution with impunity because the Supreme Court will uphold these unconstitutional laws. Let's also not forget the assault weapons ban, or let's also not forget that assault weapons do not kill that many people, like 400 or less a year. So when it comes to gun violence, assault weapons are not the problem. By banning them, you wouldn't even do anything really to how many people die. And really, guns aren't the issue. It more involves people, certain individuals owning guns, and probably most of them that are doing the killing are probably have it illegally. So let's go to the Commerce Clause. The powers granted to Congress are listed in Article 1, Section 8. I will be repeating that so you get it stuck in your head. Paragraph 3 gives Congress authority to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. This power to regulate commerce is probably the most abused part of the entire Constitution. When the Founding Fathers granted Congress the power to regulate trade, they did so to correct a deficiency that existed in the current Articles of Confederation. In 1778, during the Revolutionary War, the states formed a union under the Articles of Confederation, which ensured that each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not held by this confederation, expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled. The states' sovereignty under the Articles of Confederation resulted in states which erected protectionist trade barriers. A state might heavily tax a commodity from out of state while not taxing the same commodity produced within the state. Landlocked states would be at the mercy of states with coastal access and good harbors. If those states decided to tax imports, leaving their state. It was therefore with the intention of promoting trade and removing trade barriers that Congress was granted the power to regulate trade. The Founding Fathers did not mean regulate in the sense of restricting, but rather they wanted to promote trade among the states and prevent barriers to trade. Alexander Hamilton, in Federalist Number 22, notes that the interfering and unneighborly regulations of some states were contrary to the true spirit of the Union, and thus Congress empowered to regulate trade so as to prevent interfering and unneighborly regulations. Had the Founding Fathers imagined how the Commerce Clause would later be used to micromanage and intrude into every aspect of our daily lives, they would have been more explicit in explaining this particular power of Congress. The beginning of the end came when the end of the federal restraint came with FDR. This is the beginning of the end right here. And his New Deal. Among the many unconstitutional acts implemented as part of the New Deal was the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938, intended to prop up food prices by keeping production low. The law provided that farmers could be fined if they produced more than their allotment of various crops. Doesn't that sound socialistic? Since crops very often cross state lines in commerce among the several states, Congress felt that such regulations were unconstitutional. No, Congress felt that such regulations were constitutional, So there's a Supreme Court case in 1942, Wickard versus Filburn, was a Supreme Court ruling which upheld extending Congress's regulation even to items that do not cross state lines in commerce, or for that matter, which are not involved in commerce. Filburn was a farmer in Ohio the Department of Agriculture had set production quotas for wheat. Filburn, aware of the quotas and receiving subsidies for limiting his wheat production, nonetheless harvested more wheat than the government allotment permitted. He reasoned that the excess wheat, since it was for his own use, it never even left his farm, was unrelated to commerce, and therefore shouldn't be counted toward his allotted production. The Department of Agriculture fined him anyway. Filburn, ended up suing a whole bunch of people in the government. The case ended up at the United States Supreme Court. In its ruling, Filburn, in its ruling against Filburn, the court, ignoring more than 120 years of Commerce Clause jurisprudence, reasoned that he had not grown the extra wheat for his own use. He would have to purchase wheat. He was therefore affecting interstate commerce indirectly. This was the first case in which the Supreme Court upheld regulation of something that was not itself involved in interstate commerce. This new power to regulate anything that merely affects interstate commerce means that, practically speaking, Congress can legislate regarding just about anything. Just be sure to mention interstate commerce in the legislation. There is little you can do which does not affect interstate commerce. You can't brush your teeth or flush your toilet without doing so. Even the raw materials used to manufacture a product have moved in interstate commerce, that such justification for Congress to feel it can regulate the manufactured product, even if the product does not move in interstate commerce itself. The effects expansion of congressional power to regulate commerce among the several states is a blank check. There is little with the federal government. There is little with which the federal government cannot meddle using this broad unconstitutional interpretation of the Commerce Clause. In the rare event that the Supreme Court declares a law or practice of government unconstitutional, the other branches simply find a way around the constitutional restrictions, often paying lip service to the Constitution and passing the same legislation again, perhaps after adding some boilerplate text mentioning interstate commerce. We have gotten to the point where we are today by increasing broad interpretations of the powers actually delegated by the Constitution. There is no reason to believe that the federal government will rein itself in, and no precedent exists demonstrating that any government anywhere has ever done so without the application of external pressure. The benefit of doubt always accrues with the federal government, never to the states and the people, as regards issues of constitutionality. That is, the legislation proposed at the federal level is assumed to be constitutional. Likewise, the courts go out of their way to interpret laws as being constitutional if they possibly can. The judicial branch of the federal government has made this a rule that courts must follow. 200 years of judicial review, letting the Supreme Court decide if laws are constitutional, have further demonstrated that the courts will not act to restrain government. It is therefore up to the people and the states to take responsibility for and exercise the power of determining what is and is not constitutional. James Madison warned of an overly broad interpretation of the General Welfare Clause, the very first thing that I read up there in the section, Article 1, Section 8. There are consequences, sir, still more extensive, which, as they follow clearly from the doctrine combated, must either be admitted or the doctrine must be given up. If Congress can apply money indefinitely to the general welfare and are the sole and supreme judges of the general welfare, then they can take care of religion into their own hands. They may establish teachers in every state, country, and parish and pay them out of the public treasury. They may take into their own hands the education of children. Sound familiar, people? Establishing in like manner schools throughout the Union. They may assume the provisions for the poor. They may undertake the regulation of all roads, other than post roads. In short, everything from the highest object of state legislation down to the most minute object of the police would be thrown under the power of Congress. For every object I mention would admit the application of money and might be called, if Congress pleased, provisions for the general welfare. Sorry, my cat keeps trying to budge in here, but I'm almost done. They were being very rowdy, so I had to let them go outside the room. Madison continued, "In short, sir, without going further into the subject, which I should not have here touched on at all, but for reasons already mentioned, I venture to declare it as my opinion, that were the power of Congress to be established in the latitude contended for, it would subvert the very nature of the limited government established by the people of America. And what inferences might be drawn, or what consequences ensue from such a step, is the incumbent on us as well to consider." So, now let's go into some quotes revolving around this time. "A wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of a good government." Thomas Jefferson in his first inaugural address. We still find the greedy hand of government thrusting itself into every corner and crevice of industry and grasping at the spoil of the multitude. Invention is continually exercised to furnish new pretenses for revenue and taxation. It watches prosperity as its prey, and permits none to escape without a tribute. Thomas Paine, The Rights of Man, 1792. Good intentions will always be pleaded for any assumption of power. The Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters. Daniel Webster. Our government teaches the whole people by its example. If the government becomes the lawbreaker, it breeds contempt for law. It invites every man to become a law unto himself. It invites anarchy. Louis D. Brandeis. Liberty has never come from the government. The history of liberty is the history of resistance, a history of limitation of government power, not to increase it. Woodrow Wilson. Okay, so remember, the November truth is coming. We are witnessing the truth of the left and their intentions right now, especially with the passing of the infrastructure bill. The Demoncrats, they're not Democrats, people, they're Demoncrats, want to collapse the American economy, and this bill will surely do that. There is always more than one truth, so what about the truth of the right, or the truth of the people? Tick-tock, Dr. November is not over. I expect things to be shown and come about in the middle of the month, like around November 11th through the 20th. I already see it, I already see changes happening, but most of those changes are coming from around the world, especially when it's dealing with gold and the creation of this new gold standard. And I already see it, but I'm just going to say this. 1, 1, 1, 1, or 0, 0, 0, 0. Remember, you cannot be afraid to speak up or speak out. Fear is the mind killer. We need everyone to stand up. Attitudes need to go up. Suck it, motherfucker. Remember, I did say one thing. I did say that one party would destroy itself, and one party will rebuild. The Demoncrats are exploding. I mean, not exploding. The Demoncrats are imploding. Finally, remember that masks protect better than condoms. The CDC and FDA say that masks can stop nanoparticles like viruses. So it must be able to stop semen. So remember, you don't need to wear a condom anymore. Because masks can protect you from everything, even bullies. So just wrap that dick up. So just wrap that dick in a mask and protect you and your partner. Do your mask job. Praise science. Science is bullshit. Well, not all of it, but most of the shit that they're telling you. So, maybe there is one thing I would like to add. Oh yeah, this is for my novel. So that too. Well, I hope everyone is doing good, and I hope these next few months enlighten a lot of people, because right now we could really use it. Enlightenment, awareness, all that is what we're going for. If not, man, we are in for a devastating time. If you think that what you're seeing with prices right now and everything like that, that's just the beginning. China just created a gold standard that they're releasing in a few months. Russia left the dollar, France left the dollar, the European Union is soon to leave the dollar. So I want you to know how countries do trade under our current fiat system. Countries would purchase, in order for like international trade, like let's say China and Russia to trade, they would use their money to buy American dollars, and then they would do the transaction in American dollars. Well, that's not happening anymore. That means that there's less faith in the dollar, and if there's less faith in the dollar, that means prices go up. Another thing, the dollar is also tied to oil, and they just passed a green infrastructure bill. Do you know what that means? That means that they're taking the dollar away from oil, from what it's tied to, which means prices are going to go up. Because as if oil is selling good, your products remain cheaper. Another thing, oil is almost in everything. So, if they're really going to cut down the production of everything like they're saying they are, you basically have to reinvent everything, because oil is in every product, or in some manner, shape, or form. It's even, I believe, even like a byproduct of oil is used to coat vitamins. So, you should research, like, everything that you use, and you will find oil in it. and oil really is just like what, I mean, gas is just like 2% of oil, when it comes to like creating it and everything like that. So, um, so so basically, by passing that bill, introducing the whole green infrastructure thing, um, and doing all that, initiate just the beginning of that, you're going to see prices skyrocket here soon, because it's taking the dollar bill away from what it's tied to. And also, other countries are leaving the dollar because they don't have faith in us anymore. So America is losing their power as a nation. And if something isn't done soon, or if nobody stands up to the government to let them know what they're doing, then you might see $10 loaf of bread here soon. That's how bad it could get. It could get worse. So, hopefully the middle of the month, something good happens, more truth comes out, so that more people become aware of how messed up everything is. And if not, this is going to be, 3 more years of hell before we get to the good times. And really, the beginning of those good times probably aren't going to be that pleasant either, because a lot of work needs to be done to reverse everything that could possibly go into effect. But I don't know. Maybe there's a trump card being played somewhere. I don't know. Maybe everything that you see is not real. I don't know. But time will tell. And this is probably either my longest video or second to longest video, because I did not plan on speaking for 30 minutes. But, sorry about my cat interruptions. But, other than that, I hope everyone is good, stays good, and I hope when all this is over that in some way you're compensated for everything. Let's make Nesara Gesara a reality. Even for those people who do not think that it is a reality, you should think that it should be a reality, because it is. Like, going back to the actual constitution of this republic is the most vital thing that will save our country. The Demoncrats do not care about our country. And just like I said before, I said this on Twitter. My name's the same on Twitter, and I say a lot of shit on Twitter. The pride flag. If you research the pride flag, it is satanic. And it actually relates to Satanism. It's 6 colors, not 7. It's not God's rainbow. They take the spirit away from it too. Look into what the colors actually stand for, and who made it, why they made it, the history behind the flag, and it represents Satan. So I wish they would change that flag. That flag should not exist. And I will leave it at that. And you all have a wonderful day. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Alright, peace. Bye.